The worst time is when you're about to change your mind, whether it's about working for the company you work for, should you leave, relationship you have, should you abandon this person instead of trying to make it work, the theory you have, the approach you have to doing business, just about anything. Emotionally is really hard.
You know, it's interesting to me. You talk about how difficult it is to abandon something that you have. And this came up earlier in one of the sessions this morning, and I think it's worth reflecting on, which is the question of when we were kids, we had no trouble abandoning what we had or what we believed, or, you know, it was a constant excitement about what's next, what's the next thing that can occupy my attention. And I see, you know, and I think a lot of people would say, well, you know, you mature over time, and you have responsibilities. But at another level, I have a suspicion that we live in a society that, and we have a set of institutions in particular that discourage change, that want us to be consistent, want us to be predictable, want us to be reliable. And over time we lose that natural human instinct to be excited about change, as opposed to, oh my God, you know, I'm going to abandon something I believed for all these years.
I don't know, you must have had a really happy childhood. What about Linus and his blanket? What about the kid who doesn't want to go to camp because he misses his parents?
I don't want to say that everything is excitement, for sure, but I just am struck by the contrast when I watch young kids in action. And the contrast, I mean, it comes to a related thing. I've become more and more interested in the topic of passion and its relationship to performance. And I'm struck by the number of people who come up to me and say, you know, it's really good that maybe you have passion, and maybe some of the people you know have passion, but most people don't have passion. And it's unrealistic to expect people to have passion. But when I, again, go back and watch children, man, they're all passionate.
Well, they have curiosity, and they're not afraid of breaking things. They kind of think there's an undo button, no matter what, right? Sometimes they're wrong.
Yeah.
And to some extent, perhaps that's what, quote, maturing means. You realize there's no undo button. But if you mature beyond that, you realize there may be no undo button, but as long as I'm still alive,
There's goes on, right?
you know, people sometimes are afraid to think, well, what is the worst thing that could happen? So I do a lot of stuff on the genome, and people say, gee, I'm not sure I really want to find out what's in my genes. First of all, they're wrong. They don't really predict that much. They give you probabilities. But then I tell them, well, imagine a chart. It's a completely round pie chart with a little slice in it. That little slice says, well, the whole chart says dead or alive after 140 years. The little slice is the maybe I'd be alive part. And if you look at almost anything, and you consider, well, what are the worst consequences of this change? Will I still have my job? Maybe not. Will I still be able to get a job? Probably yes. Will I still have my family? So to some extent, you have to be unafraid to explore the good and the bad possibilities. And then you trade that off against the good part of the change. It's easier, but if you just kind of dismissively say, well, that's too risky, that's too dangerous, it might not work out, you never look at it analytically enough to make the change that might be worthwhile.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting aspect. I talked about institutions and their impact in terms of changing our mindset and orientation towards life. There's another aspect of this which I've also become more interested in over time, which is the cognitive biases that come into play in times of great change and uncertainty. You know, what kinds of biases do those kinds of environments create in us? And I think one of them is the notion that as things change more and more rapidly and uncertainty increases, I mean, predictable change you can deal with. Even if you know the trajectory and exactly where it's going.
Like the seasons, or somebody's getting older. Or
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a different thing versus unpredictable change where you have no idea where this is headed and all kinds of possibilities. I think there's an interesting human reaction that we all have, which is to magnify the perception of risk and discount the perception of reward. So we get exactly into that kind of bind that you're talking about, which is, oh my God, I can think of all the things that could go wrong. You know?
And so in your head, there's 400% chance of dying if you add up all the different ways you could die.
Exactly.
And yet, I want to say something slightly heretical, which is, this conference is about change. The word that people use even more glibly to mean goodness is innovation.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like change itself is not good. Innovation itself is not good. It needs to be change for the better, change for something useful. I spent a lot of time all over the world, and I would say that West Europeans don't like change, more or less. This is a horrible generalization, and excuse me, the people from Shell and England and so forth. But there's a sense of things work well enough. We don't need all this disruption. That may, in fact, be changing now, given what's going on. People in the United States tend to say, oh, wow, change, that's great. Especially at conferences of serious-minded business people looking for competitive advantage.
Especially Silicon Valley.
Yes, right. And then you have people in Eastern Europe or emerging markets, and they say, yeah, change. Things are changing around us rapidly. We want good change, we don't want bad change. Let's examine whatever this innovation or change is and see whether it will work. And that's the attitude I like the best, to sort of assume that there's going to be change and innovation. Things are changing around you, but which ones are good and which aren't, and actually examine the usefulness of the particular innovation or change.
It's interesting to me, and ties to something I know you've been very interested in, which is the impact in our lives of narratives and how it's playing out in politics right now. I describe myself as a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. And right now, I'm such a short-term pessimist, particularly about our political system. And it's because we have adopted a set of narratives on both sides, I think, which are ultimately threat-based narratives. You know, the Republicans, we're under attack by terrorists, they're going to get us. Internally, we've got these secularists who are going after our family values and destroying our civilization. The Democrats on the other side.
Oh, don't forget, the government is trying to run our lives. That's
yes.
very important.
No, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Evil Washington. And then on the other side, you've got the Democrats, where those mega billionaires on Wall Street are out to get our jobs. We're going to lose our jobs if we don't act now. And by the way, all these polluters are destroying our environment. We're going to face global catastrophe. And it's all about threat. And I think it goes back to this issue of change being good or bad. Here, I think it drives us to an ironic respect on both sides, to a kind of more conservative mindset of holding on to what we have.
Right, don't listen to the other guys, because they might actually have a point.
Right, get into the bunkers, hold on to what we have, protect what we have, and otherwise we're going to be destroyed. And I just worry about the impact of those threat-based narratives on the opportunity for positive change.